Hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Cornick, so welcome to Classic Movie Rambles, where I talk about old movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937. It's about 1 hour and 90 minutes long, and the movie starts with the book explaining where Snow White basically came from, and then cut into a castle where an evil queen, technically this is Snow White's stepmom, asking a magical mirror who is the fairest of the lands. And the mirror tells her up straight that she's not the fairest lady, but Snow White is. So then cutting to Snow White singing and making a wish in a wishing well, and she gets scared by a prince that starts to sing with her as she starts to sing. So there's a lot of singing in Disney movies in general, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it gets a bit too much in this case, I guess. So the evil queen hires a huntsman to take Snow White deep into the forest where the huntsman is supposed to kill her and take her heart, because the evil queen is evil and cruel. But the huntsman, of course, can't do this, so he tells Snow White to run deep into the forest and never come back. So she gets lost deep into the forest, and she starts to cry. And the animals feel some kind of sympathy, and they help her out, and they start to sing again, I guess. And they manage to find her a little house where she can stay. So excuse me, she figures that if she cleans up this dusty house that she found, that those inside will let her stay. So that's what she does, and the animal helps. They do the dishes, laundry, and cleaning. And then cutting to the dwarves. The seven dwarfs that actually lives in this house, and they're working at this mine, and the clock strikes 5, and they're about to go home for the day. So then Snow White goes upstairs and she falls asleep on the small dwarfs' beds. And then the dwarfs arrive from work and they realize that something is wrong because everything is clean, pristine, and they walk upstairs, and after some goofing around because they believe that Snow White is actually a monster, but she isn't, they realize that she is a princess. And they agree to let her stay because she can cook. And they're not really good at anything with housekeeping or food making at this point, so I thought it was kind of funny because how could they survive at this point? Who knows? So the evil queen figures out where Snow White is due to her magical mirror actually showing the location, or telling her straight out that they're at the dwarf's house in the middle of the forest. So she makes a disguise to turn herself into an ugly witch. And she also makes a poison apple that will make Snow White fall asleep somehow. I don't know why they call it a poison apple when, sleeping apple is not that appealing, I guess. So there's this funny gag where the dwarves needs to wash their hands before they eat, otherwise they won't get any food, because dirty hands on food is not a good thing. So there's like this whole goofing around where they actually wash their hands and whatnot. And later the dwarves actually sing and dance, and they're having fun, and there's like this singing number, and the princess basically, because Snow White is a princess, she tells the story about the prince and how happy she was around this guy, even though she only knew him for a short while. But this is a Disney story, I guess. But the whole gag about this dancing and singing actually ends with one of the dwarves sneezing, because I forgot to talk about it, but all these dwarves have a name related to what they do or how they act. So one is just like crazy, the other one is like I think it's called Doc, and he's just smart, and the other one is like just called Sneezy or something, and the other one is just called Grumpy, and he's grumpy all the time. So they have different personas that they portray throughout the movie, and they rarely deviate from these patterns, except for the end of the movie, I guess. So later Snow White actually gets the offer to sleep in the bed, so she sleeps upstairs where the other dwarf sleeps downstairs, and it's kind of a funny scene where the dwarves actually sleep in cupboards or in pots and whatnot, but they sleep wherever they can. And later, even so, the evil queen arrives in her ragged form to the dwarf's house. She basically goes there through the night. During the morning, the dwarfs go to their mine, and they tell her not to let anyone in because the evil queen is cunning. And what happens is that the evil witch arrives there, of course, and she offers her the apple. And the animals try to stop her, but they can't, and they go to fetch the dwarfs. So the dwarfs arrive, of course, too late, and Snow White has a bite of the apple and she falls asleep. And the dwarfs and the animals chase her up a cliff, and the cliff is struck by lightning, I believe, and the witch falls to her death. And the dwarfs don't have it in their heart to bury Snow White, so they make a coffin out of golden glass so she can be preserved. It's really sad, and they wait for spring. And then soon, when spring hits, the prince arrives because he's heard of this Sleeping Beauty in this glass container, I guess. And he gives her a kiss because that's one of the things, the only thing that actually cures the spell is love's first kiss. And how he knows, I know this, I have no idea. But Snow White is back to normal, and she said goodbye to the dwarves and the animals, and they go to a castle and live happily ever after. And that's pretty much the end of the movie. So what do I think about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? It's a good movie. I haven't seen it fully in a long while, but I have a funny story about it. So here in Sweden, we have a thing around Christmas where they show a lot of... they basically cut down these classical Disney movies into like small clips, and they show the same thing every year, except for the end part, which is a little bit different. They introduce the new upcoming movies of the year. So I've seen this music and dancing number with the dwarfs and Snow White and the animals about 30 times. And it's sort of like a tradition that you kind of have to do, but you have seen it so many times that it's forever ingrained in your brain. So I was actually kind of happy to see the movie in its full length in just in that like short moment. So when I was doing like notes for this thing, I was when that singing and dancing thing after washing their hands came up, I was like, okay, I can go to the bathroom now because I know exactly how long this clip is, and I don't need to write about it because it's ingrained in here. So I found a fun little anecdote about the how we Swedes celebrate Christmas, and how Disney movies is somehow tied to that. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for listening and or watching, and take care.